Hello and welcome to the Game Dev Garden, a podcast all about deep conversations, game development curiosities, mental health, and wherever the dialogue might take us. Thank you so much for joining me here today, and I'd like to welcome today's guest. Jack Chapman is a game designer who has worked on a variety of different design roles and a variety of different projects. Jack has worked as a cinematic designer and a level designer, and currently Jack is working at TT as an R&D designer. Welcome to the show, Jack. Great to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
No trouble at all. So how have you been, Jack? Have you been playing any games or anything recently?
I've been all right. It's just I'm kind of at that stage now, especially with it. It's like I think today is like the 1 year anniversary of working from home.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been like approaching me. So I don't know. I've been mainly just playing just like a whole host of multiplayer stuff, really.
Mhm.
Just because it's like social, just staying in contact with people. Like we were playing Worms like at the weekend with people, so that was pretty incredible to be back on that. But yeah, it's mostly multiplayer stuff. Just playing a whole load of Apex at the minute again. I'm absolutely hooked on it. So
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. I saw it's got Switch port recently, which is pretty exciting. You know.
yeah, for real. I think it's like
Yeah,
I think it's like 20 gig though, so I'm gonna have to get like an SD card. I think just for
I
Apex.
know, right?
Going on
But
Switch.
Apex on the go, and like what?
Oh
How
hell
can
yeah,
you complain? But
hell
it's
yeah.
interesting that you mentioned the sort of 1 year anniversary from work from home because my gosh, it's just unbelievable to think that it's been a full year of
Yeah.
this situation. And like looking back at early lockdowns, I found myself excited at the novelty of it, and that so quickly
Mm,
wore off, and my attitude and my feelings towards it have changed so much over the months. Having got
totally. Well, I remember like when it first happened, where like we got sent home, like I think on the Monday or something like that, maybe the Friday. It was like people who have like like high risk stuff like asthma and diabetes were like, yeah, if you've got any of these high risk factors, like you need to go now. And then we were
God,
like, oh bloody hell! And then it got to like the Monday, and it was like, yeah, everyone needs to do the same now. And like we're all packed up, and my mate works at TT as well, who I share my apartment with. And
mhm.
we were just sat there all setting our PCs up. We both just like looked at each other and were like, "This is only going to be for like 3 weeks, isn't it?" Like,
Mm.
yeah, like roll on now, and it's 365 days. It's
I know.
crazy.
I know. I remember feeling exactly the same. Like it's going to be, this is going to be, a fun couple of weeks,
Yeah,
and then we're all going to be back to normal. And it just like it quickly became apparent that that wasn't going to be the reality of the situation. And just to speak more broadly around work from home, how have you found it, and what impact has it made on your job?
yeah. So it's a really difficult one because I thought like at the start of lockdown, it was kind of okay for the stage of the project I was on,
Mm.
because I was obviously working on the Skywalker saga,
Yeah.
and for the point of development we were at, it wasn't too bad because a lot of it was feedbacking on a lot of the stuff that was in the game, and
Mm.
kind of really just having a lot of meetings of getting the game as best as it can be. Like I think if it was much earlier on in the project, like really trying to come up with like the basic bits for a
Yeah.
game, it would have been a very different experience.
Mm.
But then that kind of changed because I think it was like August time now. So I switched to my new role, and that's kind of been what I've just described. Then when it has kind of been going back to basics and trying to have meetings with people about really core basic concepts of what we want to be doing and
Oh
focusing
yeah.
on, and it kind of feels like if we were just in a room with a whiteboard,
Oh man.
we
Yeah.
could just get stuff done way quicker. But it's definitely got to the point now when I'm fairly adapted to it,
Mhm.
but it's not ideal, but at the same time, you can't complain too much because I'm still doing the job and I've still
Mm.
got my job, and compared to other people for the past 12 months, like it's been an absolute breeze compared to like people losing their jobs and stuff. So
Yeah.
I do have to kind of count my lucky blessings at the same time.
No, no, I feel similarly as to that as well. And the point you made about sort of that whiteboard marker design stuff that
Mm,
is, so essential during many stages of the project is
totally.
very difficult to recreate that because, you know, the sort of like the nuances of the interactions in that situation.
100%.
Looking across the room and like
Yeah.
sort of scribbling something out and stating your ideas to a group of people,
Yeah.
being in the room together.
Yeah.
It means $1,000,000, but you are right in that we are very fortunate to
That's
keep
it.
doing what we love in
That, that's it.
these
Yeah.
strange
That's
times.
like, yeah, 100%. That's like the one thing where if I ever do have like a bit of a bit of like a down day, I'm like, you know what, like
Mm.
at least I'm still getting paid. Like I don't need to
Yeah.
worry about next month or anything like that. So
Mm.
yeah, strange one.
Yes, and we're all going to have our days like that on given the situation, and it's so hard to find the spice in life sometimes.
Oh,
Yeah,
totally,
definitely.
totally.
It's interesting. I've spoken about sort of like work from home and lockdown stuff on the podcast with previous guests, and
Yeah.
I think it's affected us all so differently as
hmm
well.
hmm
Yeah. So Jack, you have had a really interesting path in games, having studied graphic design at one point and also studied game design.
Yeah.
And you've also worked on like a variety of different projects and roles, and now you find yourself in quite a unique position of an R&D designer. Could you talk us a little bit about through what is a fantastic journey in games?
Yeah, sure. So my actual proper journey, it began. I guess I can trace it back to the kind of like year 9 time at secondary school when it's like,
Mhm.
right, you've done this. Now, what do you want to do with your life? Pick options of where you want to be.
I know.
And, you kind of have that moment of like, crap, what do I want to be? I'm only like 14 or whatever old you are at that point. And I've always been like very like hands-on, like very arts and crafty, like building stuff as a kid. And I've obviously always just playing games. And I'm going to apologize now because the amount of times that I'll probably mention the Halo series in this podcast will do people's heads in.
Oh, if anyone
But
follows Jack on Twitter, you're already going to be aware Jack's absolute
yeah.
love of the Halo franchise.
But that was obviously like a huge part of like, it was had a big impact on me from a very young
Mm,
age of being like, crap, like this is how big games can feel and just how like alive a world can be for a game. And that at the time was like cool. I was really into it, and like Halo 3 was coming out when I was at school, and I used to obsess over every detail of the game, like trailers, all the behind the scenes. And it was watching those behind the scenes moments, being like, oh hell, like this is like people, like there's people who make games like I've never really thought about it too much before. There's people in studios modeling all these characters and weapons and putting all these systems together. So it was really from there, and I tried to gear my options at the time at secondary school as much as I could. So
mhm.
I tried to take like art, media, and I think it was like graphics or something like that, which they didn't let me take because they said it wasn't academic enough for my options. So I got forced to take additional science, which I absolutely flunked at. Like I had to resit it at every exam.
Oh,
Um,
isn't it ridiculous that they do something
oh,
like
it's
that when
crazy.
so clearly you could have done a
Yeah,
great job of graphic design? They gave
yeah,
you something that they knew
yeah.
might not work.
It was so crazy.
Yeah.
So like I did that, finished school, and then it was like, right, where do I go now? And I was like, okay, well, I have no idea how to get into games, so I'll just focus on like art and like graphicy stuff. I'll just go
Mm,
to like an art college or something. And there was a college in my town, and pretty much everyone went to the same college, did like your sixth form stuff. And I was like, I don't want to do any more like school work. It's just not for me. So I look around all these art colleges, and I just look around for it. It must have been weeks with my parents going to all these colleges all over the northeast, and none of it was working. And there was like a tech college at my hometown, and it was kind of mostly known for more like BTech courses and stuff.
mm,
And that just didn't seem like I would ever find anything there for me. But I was like, hell with it. I'll go look around it. Look around at all of it, all the media bits, all the art bits, and it's still nothing was jumping out. And I was just like defeated at this point. And we took like a shortcut through the building where we came through before. We kind of passed this like open planned area, and there was like loads of like TV and film type posters on the walls and stuff like that, and loads of art books and bookshelves. And I was like, oh, this looks
mm.
okay, but we didn't really take notice of it. And then I noticed this gigantic Irish man sat on this small MacBook laptop, and he was like 3D modeling. And I just kind of stopped in my tracks. I was like, looks like those like behind the scenes videos I used to watch when I was like 14.
Yeah.
I was like, excuse me, I was like, is this guy sound ridiculous? But is this a games course? And he just went, yeah, it is. And he was like, you're interested? And I'm like, hell yeah. So I just sat and talked with him. And I'm talking about Matthew McGrory, by the way. Big shout out to him.
Big shout out,
Yeah,
big friend of the show.
yeah, 100%. And that was kind of it from academic how I got into it. So I did 2 years at Darlington College, loved that. Then went on to Teesside University, which you also went to. Big up
That's true.
Teesside.
Yes, yes, we've had. I imagine that a few more guests will be
Yeah, 100%.
inside on the
Yeah,
show
it's
for
it's it's
sure.
it's it's really strange about that. I feel like I've ended up knowing more people about who went to Teesside like after I finished like my university life,
Gosh,
which is
really?
so weird. Yeah. But yeah, so I did the games course there. I had a change of heart for a little bit, just for some reasons with frustrations on the course and some of the modules and things like that. So I
Mhm.
kind of switched off and doing like a year of graphic design. Found that I really didn't like a lot of the like pretentious side of graphic design, and it kind of did me head in.
Right. Yeah.
So I switched back. um, yeah, and then I finished up my games course. That was like 2016. I think I finished like May time. That was the end of my like academic stuff, and then I got into QA at TT. I was there for about 2 months, maybe 3 months. There was an intern application for like a junior design role. Applied for that, and then that was kind of my gateway into the industry, I guess.
Wow, that's awesome, Jack.
Mm.
That's it's always nice to hear like people's origin stories and that
Yeah.
progression. And I've recently been watching the Halo vid docs, kind of
Yes.
inspired by some of our conversations over
Uh
the
huh. Uh huh.
sort of on the run up to
Hmm.
the show, and it's really interesting how sort of like early on that stuff was, because it wasn't the inside video game documentaries, especially development documentaries,
Mm.
that weren't really a thing during that era.
Yeah.
And going
Very
back and
rare. Very rare.
watching,
If you did
yeah,
manage to find one.
it was super rare. And I was talking to you about this in the pre-show as well. I did a very similar thing with Quake and
Mm. Mm.
the id Software team, and they had some
Nice.
like internal studio stuff, and that was on like a collector's edition, really hard to find, but I sort of stumbled across it, and it was
Yeah,
super valuable.
that's class. Yeah, I absolutely just adore pretty much anything like that I could get my hands on, because I ended up going back and I didn't realize at the time, but there was like a massive behind the scenes thing for Halo 2, which I never watched. So I was like, crap, I've missed like an entire like behind the scenes chapter of Bungie. So I was like, crap, I'll go back and watch that. And just absolutely obsessed with just like the idea of, because I think I spoke to you in the pre-show as well, but there was a time with Bungie when they just felt like this a strange indie atmosphere about them. Like when you look at the time when like games like Gears of War were coming out, and like you had like the kind of like behind the scenes of like people like Cliffy B and all
Yeah,
these really professionally shot like headshots of them all talk about the game. Then you go to Bungie, and it's just like a bunch of guys just like around a
it's
table
strange, isn't it?
talking
Yeah,
about like animation. Like they don't have mocap
yeah,
suits;
yeah.
it's all just like referenced, and it's
It's
like
mad, isn't it? It's just
crazy.
mad. Like the energy and the sort of the vibe that those early docs gave off is absolutely something I recommend checking out. And I sort of wanted to focus on and talk a little bit about your frustrations with the course and stuff, because
Yeah, sure.
when I was a student, no matter how good my course was and the opportunities it gave me during second year, I
Mm,
found myself extremely frustrated and disheartened with my studies. And
right.
when we work as games professionals and people who work in the game space,
Hmm.
we can sometimes be very close to um, our perception of ourselves is very tied in how well we're doing and what we're doing professionally and what we're making.
Yeah, totally.
um, and it's I think it's important to highlight the fact that during your studies it's not always going to be plain sailing, and as you've experienced and as I've experienced, there are going to be some difficult periods for sure. um,
Yeah,
and
totally.
that's kind of part of the journey, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, but your college story as well is strikingly similar to mine, which
Yeah,
is
I think we
always,
kind of spoke about in the
yeah,
pre-show that we had a very similar, like to
very
use your
tight.
phrase, and a bit of a similar origin story.
Yeah. That's awesome, mate. Well, if we could move on to our next question, it would be great to hear a little bit about how you found yourself focusing on an R&D role in particular.
Yeah, so this is like a really strange one how it's kind of came about. It's it's more or less within the studio. Obviously, I can't divulge too much, but there has
Of
been
course.
a bit of like a concentrated effort to start looking in different avenues um, with our games, and there was a bit of a team put together, and it was something I just applied for because like a lot of it I've kind of specialized in, especially my time at TT,
Yeah.
and with really kind of trying to push things in certain directions. Just kind of mainly stemming from, I guess, when I was working on Lego Worlds, which was it was a really small design team, and I kind of joined on that when it was like pretty much maybe 6 months from shipping, I think.
Mm.
So for that, it was kind of putting content into the game, working with a small team, and then having that game and trying to support it as much as we could with a relatively small budget to keep doing that. So like I've kind of had that experience of always being on little teams and being able to like try and get easy wins and doing like
Yeah.
pitches for like next bits of content for like a game because I guess it was like a bit of like a live service game really to a certain degree. Like we a lot of post launch content for it. You could like log on every week and get new stuff. So I kind of had a weird like I don't know how to put it really, almost like a weird like game industry 101 when I was working
Yeah.
there because I got to experience like studio life, but then small team stuff in like a I guess AAA space is quite
Mm.
rare, and had
Totally.
to have a lot
Totally.
of say and sway over things. So fast forward anyway to when this role appeared. Everything on the description was like, this just sounds like something I've done ever since I've been at TT. So I just applied for it. Went through the entire process, and then managed to get onto the team really. So it's not a large team at all. It's maybe only 20 people, I'd say. So it's relatively small.
Mhm.
But yeah, we're just pursuing a lot of different stuff at the minute, and that's kind of all I can say, unfortunately.
No, no, no trouble at all. I appreciate for you the insight. It's I'm sure going to be super interesting for our viewers, and I love the natural progression that you sort of found yourself building those skills and naturally finding a
Yeah,
role that utilize them. That's always super rewarding.
totally. And I think we're kind of jumping back a second, really, but the whole thing
Mhm.
about how people have different ways in the industry, and it's. I always remember being. I can never remember who was doing the talk at uni, but it could have been when Gary Napper came once, and
Mhm.
people obviously in the sorry, on the design course, were like really kind of pushing to be like, look, like what's the advice to get in? What's your advice to kind of crack into the industry? And it's just a thing of like everyone's got their own way. Like everyone, like you
Yes.
can like absolute crawl your way in by just like going to the same door and repeating it. Or some people manage to land, really good gigs straight out the bat. Some people it doesn't happen for like 3 years, but when they do, they like get in hard at some really good studio, and it's really crazy to see the amount of people who like kind of expect a job to be waiting for him almost. And it's like, look,
Yeah.
you're
Oh my
you're on
God.
a course of like I don't know how many people, at least what 150 people maybe.
Yeah, it's like 100 to 150 people each
Yeah,
year. Exercise.
like that's just at one uni in one part of like the UK.
Yes.
It's like
The
there's
I
no way in
remember.
hell like you're
Yeah.
ever gonna like just waltz into a job. Like you've really got to make yourself
Yeah.
stand out. And
You do.
like something that I saw recently on Twitter was it was someone sharing some project work to do with kind of world building and adding like company logos to stuff to make your world kind of fleshed out. And it kind of sparked a thing in my head of like every time I've ever done like a personal game project where
Mm.
like the game world be like a really important factor of it. That's
Yeah.
something I've always kind of strived to do. And I started looking through some of my work really, and when I was going through it, I looked at my portfolio, and it's like I don't think I've got like the strongest portfolio in the world, but I think it's like a decent enough job. And something I noticed was a lot of my personal uni projects, like there's the kind of weird blend that you don't really know what's what without digging for it. And it's something I've started recommending to students
Yeah.
because if you're like someone who's looking over CVs applications And if you're just seeing a lot of student works for like, normally for junior positions, you're going to see a lot of similar things of this is just uni module work, like this is that. So if you
Yeah.
can present your work so that it looks, something other than just a uni module,
Mhm.
like you're doing a lot of like heavy lifting yourself there, just purely with its presentation. Like,
I couldn't agree more. That's a spot on piece of advice. I think it's about being strategic as well. Like
totally.
you can't actually, because it's not enough to rely on your skills. You kind of
Hmm.
have to, exactly like you said, you have to sort of carve your own path. And
Totally that, yeah.
almost everyone I speak to has like a slightly different story, whether it's meeting someone at an event or applying repeatedly or going for a slightly different role, whether that's
Yes.
QA or production.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
There are
definitely.
so many paths.
Yeah, definitely. I think like kind of while we're on the subject of
Mhm.
the whole like finishing uni, uh, looking towards your first position. Something I think we talked about in the pre-show was there's a lot of stuff, like a lot of stuff that uni just doesn't teach you, and like I don't even mean actual like game design skills. Like I'm talking like game studio skills.
I am 100% in agreement there, mate. Yeah.
Like there's like such a pressure, I think, of like a designer because you have to. there- There's like the way you're perceived at uni, and I guess to a certain degree within an actual studio or team. There's a
Mhm.
there's a perception of designers that they need to be these like encyclopedias of just game design knowledge. They've played everything that's out. They've
Yeah.
played everything for the past like 40 years of
Yeah, it's
games.
it can feel sometimes like they're the bit of the glue in the team that sort of like
Yes,
sticks
yeah,
all the departments together.
totally,
Level
totally.
design especially,
Yeah,
is
totally.
indicative of that.
Yeah, and I think that it's just one of those things of you kind of end up in these positions even as a junior role. At least in my experience, anyway, like, of being in that role and
Mhm.
quickly kind of falling into this thing of like I need to like know stuff. There's people waiting
Yeah.
on what we do to kind of crack on. And something I learned very very early on was to learn the phrase "I don't know" or just "I
Oh
don't
my
know
god,
yet."
yeah.
And the amount of time you will save yourself by just
Mhm.
doing that rather than just like coming up with an answer on the spot and just letting your mouth just open and close without really saying anything of substance. Like you just
Yeah.
end up putting yourself into a hole you don't want to be in.
Mhm. Uh,
So if there's any
completely.
if there's any students listening or people who've just finished uni going into like the industry, like I can't hit that point more. Like it's so vital.
It is. No, no. There's nothing that upsets me more than someone who says a bunch of words and there's a lack of content
Oh,
behind them. I think
100%. I
I think in
hate it.
design, yeah, in design as well, it's especially important to be concise and be
Yeah,
direct and elegant with what you're trying to convey,
100%, mate.
because good design is about that.
yeah, 100%. Like, especially now for working from home as well,
Oh my god, yeah.
because like you can't sit with someone and bring up a game example, put a pad in their hand, and like talk them through it. Like you've got to really be sat there like communicating as best you can. If you're sat waffling, like especially over Zoom, like my eyes just glaze over, and I'm sat there like, right, is this person like finished talking yet or what?
Yeah,
It's horrendous.
I understand, mate,
Mm.
completely. It's really, there's a lot of stuff that's very hard to teach, and you know, I'll say this once and I'll say this 1,000 times. When you start your first industry role, no matter how long you've been a student for or how long you've been practicing game development for, you are going to be learning really, really fast and you're going to be coming in really, really hot
Yeah,
because they just can't teach you and you
yeah.
just can't learn everything. You
It's
have to pick it up from actually being in a room with people who have experience and learning it yourself as you go.
Yeah, it's that's quite interesting actually, because like I think we've also spoke about this in the past, but like,
Mm.
what was your like onboarding like when you first entered the industry? Like, was that quite like a fluid experience, or was that kind of like what
I
you've said?
I
Like,
would
just
I would describe it as rough and ready. I was definitely thrown in at the deep end, and it was very much trial by fire in a lot of ways. And
yeah,
that's not just the tasks that you're given in terms of white box this level. It was also source control. It was how do you collaborate? How do you conduct yourself in a meeting?
hmm,
All that stuff. What
yeah,
about you?
yeah. So like, I guess I've already spoke about it really when I first joined design and TT, but yeah, like I feel like I had a really weird way in, because I 100% had that same thing you're saying there of, you know, this is the stuff that needs doing. Can you crack on? And it's like, what? And
I
then you're
know.
in meetings with stuff, and it's like, oh my god, what is going on? And yeah, I think for a moment you sit there and you're still kind of pinching yourself that shit. I'm a game designer at a studio now. Like, this is rad. Like, I think that for your first week doesn't really settle in properly. So when
No,
you're
it doesn't.
expected to be doing work and like listening and conducting meetings and
Yeah,
coming up with actual plans, like I said before, to let other departments crack on with what they need to do.
yeah,
It is quite a big, just a big moment, I think, especially as well with normally, at least anyway, being the youngest person in this. If you're coming from uni,
yeah.
you do feel like you're starting school again in a weird
Oh,
way.
we talked about this in the pre-show, but the sort of starting school analogy is really powerful because there are so many dynamics at play amongst the team. You're the new kid on the block. You've got all this stuff to prove. It's definitely a great analogy.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally.
That's awesome, mate. Would you like? I think it would be great if we could talk about sort of some mental health stuff. So, would you be comfortable talking a little bit about your mental health on the show today, Jack?
Yeah, totally. That's completely fine.
Fantastic. That's really really appreciated. Um, so we talked about this in the pre-show as well, but sort of how do you lean on your friends and the people in your life to sort of get the support you need? Because this is definitely something that I do and sometimes struggle with at the best of times. You know, sort of that idea of how do you let someone know that you're having a bad week and you need a bit of support and a bit of like that just extra time from someone. I just wanted to ask you sort of how do you go about that, mate?
Yeah, so like kind of what I was saying before, is there's things like, I think is people who play games a lot, and especially people who play online games a lot, like a lot of my friends. We
Mhm.
at the start of lockdown, I remember was all like using that like more than normal, like living in Discord like practically on weekends, and just be like, okay, like what we playing tonight.
Yeah,
And like to me, that's been like the really good, like the great part of working from home in a weird way. It's like kind of brought me closer to a lot of like friends, and like it's been really strange because when like the Modern Warfare reboot came out, like we still play it now and then, and it's got to the point now when I'm like playing with people I went to school with who used to play the original Modern Warfare,
oh no way.
and my cousins who I used to play with like back in 2007, and we're all
Mhm.
sat there in like 2021, like this is weird.
That,
um,
yeah,
but yeah, like it sounds really weird, like just really strange to like just say play video games a lot. But I've ended up really like finding a comfort space with just online gaming as a social place rather than being like
mhm,
a competitive arena almost. Like we just go on there just to talk and hang out, and what
yes,
what we're playing doesn't really matter. Like it can be
I
literally anything.
couldn't
Like
agree more.
it's like we're just on there just to kind of catch up with everyone. Um, but going into like a bit more of like a deeper dive with it, like I just stress that like as much as I did say before of we're the lucky ones, so to speak, that we can still do our jobs and we've still got that. Like it doesn't mean that whatever you're going through isn't as valid as someone else who's going through some like rough times. Like I
Yes,
like
yes.
I can talk about myself personally and some of my other friends who have both like we've both got to the point now when we've privately spoke about things, and we both started taking the steps to actually seek kind of like go through the correct channels and going
Mhm.
through the actual medical route and getting someone to talk to, and just actually taking it seriously. And whether that is coming from a place of because I've been battling with stuff for quite a long time really,
Yeah,
and it's got to the point now when I'm like, okay, being in like working from home and lockdown obviously isn't helping things. I know we've got a roadmap apparently out of this now in the UK, but it might not happen again. Things might get delayed, and I can't keep using that kind of rabbit on a stick that they're doing with us.
yeah,
So to me, I've been really proactive. I've gone, you know what, hell with it. I'm just going to make the leap, and I'm just going to address this stuff head on now. So
yeah,
I do urge anyone going through that stuff to just get over that like hump of doing it. It's rough as hell to admit that you need help, and it sounds dead
very
cliche
true.
saying that, but I think even as like a guy saying it, and I'm obviously not the most masculine guy in the world, like at all. But it is tough sometimes to admit that you are in an absolute, shocking place and you're having a bit of a bad one. And it's okay just to be like, you know what, I need to go and get taught. And that also comes back to like, having to feel like you need to socialize with people.
Hmm.
Because, like I said before, the only social outlet you get now is through Discord, or whether it's FaceTime and you're playing Among Us, or whatever you do to kind of socialize with your friends.
Hmm.
Like, it's all right if you just need that alone time, and having the nerve to kind of say to your friends, like, I don't actually want to be around like anyone right now. I just want to kind of chill. I want to put a movie on. I just want to do whatever I've got to do. And even that's quite hard to admit, especially to your friends, because it kind of could be perceived that you're saying, I don't want to hang out with you people, but it's
Yeah,
not. It's just
I
you
know. I
going
understand.
like, my head's wrecked. I can't. Like, the thought of having to socialize and put effort into that is just too much right now. Like, I can't do that.
Mate, that is so true. There's a bunch of points, really amazing points there, and I just want to say, well done for realizing that you needed some outside help, and getting yourself in a position when you were able to go and seek that, because it's so easy to push that back a week. I'll do it next week. I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you
Hmm.
can sort of deny how you're feeling as well. You can say, oh, I'm going to get better, or
Hmm.
it's not that bad,
Yeah.
when the reality is, you should it will get to a point where you essentially need to say, look, you need to say to yourself, or you need to say to someone who can help you, I need some help from the outside, whether that's through your GP, which it should be, uh, or even if it's just letting your friends know that you're in that
Yeah.
situation.
Or like, honestly, like, even that latter point there, like, it's a really big thing to say to your mates that you
It
are
is.
having a shocking time. And I like kind of what I said there. This past 12 months, it's been a bit of a hotbed for everyone, like, having shocking times. And I think
Yeah.
it's made a few people like retreat a bit and be like, you know what, like, my the way I'm feeling isn't valid in comparison to, X person or Y person.
It's so much more complicated now, mate, isn't it? Like,
It
it's
is.
it's not it's not
It
lock,
really, really is.
lockdown has made mental health so much more complicated and
It really
messier
has.
than it's ever been before.
Yeah.
Mental health isn't exactly a straightforward or easy thing at all.
No.
But I definitely think the situation has changed a lot of people's perceptions of how they deal with these things. And I wish the best to anyone out there that's really struggling with that stuff, because it is no joke, and it is very difficult.
100%, 100%. But yeah, I think, like, obviously, because I'm kind of conscious that my answer at the start of this was just play video games with your friends.
Uh,
Like, I think I need to stress, like, how important it is to, mainly because if you're a game designer or working games, there's a very high chance, as I've said before, that you play games a lot.
mhm.
So it's really important that you drag yourself away from your screen.
I
Like,
know, because you just live in front of it.
yeah, like,
It's
there's
tricky, isn't it?
yeah, there's nothing worse than going, done for the day,
I
boot up
know, like
Steam.
it's like, oh, great day at work. Smashed for tasks, really
Yeah,
good progress.
yeah.
Now to sit in front of the small screen,
treat.
big
I'm,
screen to
I'm
small
gonna
screen.
I'm gonna treat my eyes to the small screen.
I
Yeah.
know, and it's, we talked about this in the pre-show as well, but both of us have found a lot of solace in, like, exercise and running, and
Yeah, definitely.
that suits
Well,
you. Super important.
we did until I absolutely destroyed my knee like three
Oh
days
no!
ago. It's got to the point now when I've had to bloody get one of those knee braces, and I
Jack,
never,
what have
I,
you done?
I never thought this would happen, but I think turning 27's like destroyed my body, like with like a bit of a Thanos click, and it's just done me now.
Oh gosh,
So
but
yeah,
yes,
exercise, but warm up,
yeah,
stretch.
yes, yes, I would I would advise a bit of stretching. That is true. Gosh, yes.
Definitely
We've
stretch.
covered some really great points there, Jack, and I really appreciate your candid comments and your input, and talking about this stuff, because I think that it's really important that there are voices having these conversations in the public space, because sometimes when you look at the games industry, and the difficulties, the stresses and the challenges that
Mm,
working in games provide,
yeah.
talking about mental health is essential, in my opinion.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it is quite weird when you approach mental health within people in the industry anyway, because you do have, I think it's quite hard as a consumer when you're looking in and you read articles about crunch and it's all this horrendous stuff that you hear.
Mm,
But I think until you go through shipping one title, you don't really know what crunch can be like for someone, like for a developer. And
yeah,
it's a really difficult conversation to have around it, because obviously, like with the back end of last year when all stuff was coming out about like Naughty Dog and CD Projekt Red,
yeah,
I
really bad, really difficult article to
yeah,
read,
yeah,
honestly.
and I think like that it opened up it kind of lifted the veil a little bit more, but I still don't think like just a whole bunch of gamers who hear about crunch. I don't think they really understand what it can be like for developers who are really pushing in as much as they can into a game. Like they're giving up all
Mm,
these hours, and if things just aren't still working on a project for X, Y, and Z reasons, to know that you're putting all this blood, sweat, and tears in, and that like goalpost isn't getting closer here, it can be really really tough on you. And
massively.
it's great that you can be around your colleagues and you are all in the same boat to a certain degree. But at the minute, or at least when I was on the kind of last project, when you are crunching for these milestones and you're getting there, like you kind of realize that you just sat at your own home anyway, and it's that idea of you're pushing towards something as like as this collective
Mm.
pulling through.
It's just you and your computer, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
kind of strange when you take your headphones off and you
yeah,
log out. You're like, I'm kind of just doing this in like solace almost, and so
totally.
like it's wherever you can find there's that camaraderie and that sense of community, whether it's with your friends or your colleagues. Like just get it and embrace the hell out of
Yeah,
it.
the thing I would say about crunch and my perspective on it is it's really it's just not that simple. It is
It's
no
not. It's not.
even when you hear those when you see those articles and those stories, like they're not really painting the complete picture, because
No.
crunch and overtime culture and just the act and time
Yeah.
that is putting extra hours into a project, it
Yeah.
really isn't a transparent and easy thing to
Mm.
talk about. It's not, you can't just click your fingers and say all crunch is good, all crunch is bad.
Yeah, and I feel like that.
It's so
Yeah.
complicated and
Yeah,
nuanced.
I feel like that was kind of like that was the discourse. I think until last year, it was pretty much it's a necessary evil,
Well,
or
yeah.
it's it's terrible and needs to be banned. But
Mhm.
some like until you're in the the environment of crap, like deadlines Friday, need to get this in, and then someone else goes, oh, like yeah, you know what, like I'm going to say and get it done. Until you have that strange like how would I articulate this? Not like peer pressure. I really don't mean that. That's like a really bad term to use it. But
Mhm.
when you see someone who's sacrificing their time, and then you're prepared to like be like, well, I'm just going to finish up my normal hours and go out, which you should be entitled to go and do. There's that little bit in your head that goes, am I doing something bad here by just wanting to leave normal?
That's why it's messy, isn't it? That is a really great example of why it's just not that simple. It's
Yeah,
it's good, it's bad.
yeah,
You know, I'm not going to pretend to be a crunch expert. I'm fortunate to have only crunched a handful of times in my career,
hmm
but it really is not. It just isn't a straightforward topic, and I would advise anyone reading those pieces to really sort of think about it's really the business of the people on those projects, and it's
yeah.
it's it's very difficult. It's a difficult one to talk about, but yeah, it's nuanced and it's a complicated topic of conversation for sure.
It really really is.
Yeah. Well, what a lovely, I say lovely, what an interesting topic to end the show on, Jack.
Nice
I
and
really,
merry.
yeah, nice and merry. As only happy topics of conversation on the Game Dev Garden. But Jack, would you like to plug your Twitter or anything, or your website? Thank you again for coming on the show.
Yeah, totally. So you can find me on Twitter at Shaka Inc. My website I won't share with you. It's all connected to my Twitter if you want it. Other than that, I don't really have anything interesting to plug. Other than kind of just watch this space. Hopefully, I'll get back to doing some personal projects soon. I've got like 3 levels that I started and still need to finish. So hopefully I'll be posting more about that stuff soon, because I haven't posted anything remotely level design focused on my Twitter in quite some time.
Well, in that case, I'll be sure to share it to the audience when it does come to fruition, mate. That's no problem at all.
Brilliant.
But brilliant. Thanks again for coming on the show. And thank you all so much for listening to today's episode of the Game Dev Garden, a podcast all about deep conversations, game development, curiosities, mental health, and wherever the dialogue might take us. Thanks again, guys. See you next time.